Okay, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday afternoon. I really value your time, and my goal is always to add value to what you're doing. And I put in the chat box to really start thinking about what you want out of this webinar today. And feel free to ask questions. And at any point during the webinar, happy to interact with you. It's been a great month. I'm really looking at the COVID-19 virus as a way to really conquer the fear of the unknown. I think so many of us are kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen. The government, the May 4th date was just moved to May 18th, and now it's like, oh, it's extended 2 more weeks. And it's very hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And frankly, even if we saw a light at the end of the tunnel, we don't even know what that light means. So I've really adopted a mindset of using it as fuel to not wait around and just move forward. And the longer you wait, the more you get out of practice in your routines, the more you have to rebuild your habits. And so I'm really proud of the mindset I have. And I think for all of you in building remote relationships, it's really important to think about that, because so much of our communication, our relationship building is virtual now. So with that said, no further ado, let's get into this webinar today. So a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I speak a lot about emotional intelligence and communication, and I'm a real believer in that we've lost our way when it comes to being confident and effective communicators. And whether that's through social media or texting and phones and so on and so forth, it's a challenge, and people are really struggling to know how to connect. And so I built Mindset Go around helping people become more confident and effective communicators through emotional intelligence, which we will be touching upon today, conversation intelligence, how to have difficult conversations, and multi-generational intelligence, which is how to connect with the 5 generations in and out of the workplace. You see this quote I have at the bottom of this slide. I'm a huge believer in this. And now more than ever, emotions are running high, fears and anxiety is running high. And I think Maya Angelou really captured it when she said, people really don't forget how you make them feel. Just to talk quickly about some expectations for today. Whenever I do an in-person training, a webinar, a speaking engagement of any kind, my goal is really a few things. One is I really want to stimulate thought. I really hope you leave this webinar today thinking about some of the ways you've been approaching interactions and the different relationships in your life and some different approaches to those relationships. I hope you can utilize at least 2 or 3 new techniques that you can immediately apply after the training today, and generally become more aware. And so that's what we're looking for. And if you've been on some of the past webinars I've done this month, and I'm really proud to say we exceeded a record this month. We had 250 attendees on our webinars this month. It was a big milestone for us. And one of the things you'll hear me say is be present. Put your phones away, shut down your email, shut your phones off, remove any potential distractions, because so much of what we're talking about today is remote and virtual engagement. And so you have an obligation. If you took 45 minutes out of your day today, make sure you're removing all distractions and maximizing the experience and fully participating. So the agenda, let me just quickly cover what we're going to do today. We're going to identify and overcome the challenges that make remote relationships difficult and how you can really address those things. Measuring performance, setting and managing expectations, recognizing red flags to productivity and engagement from home. And as always, we'll cover how to facilitate habit replacement and behavior change, which in my mind is probably the most difficult thing leaders have to do. And there's a long list of difficult things leaders have to do. So let's start with relationship management. I put this slide together because it really struck me a couple of months ago how many relationships we're managing on a daily basis. Now, if you're a leader, depending on what level of leadership you're on in your organization, look at this list for a moment. You've got clients and prospects and vendors and managing down and up and sideways, and family and kids and significant others and friends. It's mind-boggling. And the thing I want you to take out of this slide as we go through this presentation today is part of being effective at engaging people virtually in remote relationships is recognizing that everybody is different. There is no golden chalice. There is no pill you can take that works for everybody. And so much of what I preach when I talk about communication is situational awareness. And we get in habits and we have tendencies of how we communicate and how we expect to be communicated with, but we have to recognize that we have to treat people differently and individually. And if we don't, and if we fall into those bad patterns, it will absolutely jeopardize not only your relationships, but your credibility and your ability to influence others. Now, before I cover this, I want to talk about the concept of change management. And, you know, it's so funny. Change management's always a big deal for companies, but now we're all immersed in change management and having to make changes in so many aspects of our lives. And I don't know if this makes me really old or not, but I was a big fan of George Carlin. And George Carlin, the routine that made him famous was the 7 dirty words. And I have my own 7 dirty words. And I want you to, as I tell you what these words are, I want you to really process them. One of them is change, because let's face it, most of us are very uncomfortable with change, even though, by the way, innately our brain is wired to like change, believe it or not. Well, we're not going to cover that today. Second is sales. Sales is a dirty word. No one wants to be associated with sales. They do anything in their power to not call themselves a salesperson. Third is emotions. Emotions in the workplace are really frowned upon. Discussing emotions, you would be considered high maintenance or a soft leader. Fourth and fifth are politics and religion, unsafe topics to discuss. Sixth is money. Money can be a very difficult area for people to discuss. And my 7th dirty word is rejection. And one of the challenges in remote relationships is you often lose body language. And I know people might be saying, well, if I can see someone's face on a Zoom call or something like that, well, you can, but you really can't be watching all people at all times. You lose the ability to really attend to someone's body language. So the feeling that you're actually successful in engaging and influencing people is challenging. Now, when it comes to emotional intelligence, what we're talking about today are really critical aspects of being effective at building remote relationships. Now, I want to talk about self-awareness first. And here's what I mean by self-awareness. Every time you interact with someone, especially at our present state, here are the things that you need to be aware of that they could be dealing with. Maybe they have people in their family that have lost their jobs or furloughed. Maybe their pay has been reduced or their hours have been reduced. They're dealing with things at home they haven't had to. There's a fear of the unknown and people's fears and anxieties about what's going on. And when it comes to self-awareness, you have your own issues, right? What are you feeling uncomfortable about? What are you feeling that's how you're going to be impacted personally and professionally, right? Because you know decisions and the way you communicate to people are dictated by how you're feeling and your confidence level and what fears you're experiencing. So one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of leaders that I work with is they have a fear of being able to really garner the new skill set of virtual engagement and remote relationships. It's really a different skill set. It's an extension of an existing skill set, but it really requires you to utilize skills that you maybe haven't had to, maybe you've done it occasionally, but you certainly haven't had to perfect them and do it on a regular basis. So I'm hearing a lot of leaders really struggling. They haven't been trained on the skills. They're not really sure how to effectively utilize them. And then they have to, again, deal with the balance of how the other person's feeling at that moment. So we're not going to spend a ton of time, but these are the 5 aspects of emotional intelligence. Self-control is your ability to react and respond to situations. Motivation is your ability to motivate yourself when you're in crisis or have a bout of lost confidence. We see this in salespeople all the time. When they're in a rut and they struggle with motivation, they struggle to get out of their house and go do lead generation and things like that. But motivation is also your ability to motivate the people that work for you and the people that are around you. Empathy social skills. These are the aspects of emotional intelligence. And these are the skills that effective remote relationship leaders will need to have. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. And the elephant in the room is trust. And what's interesting to me about trust is I think it plays out in a few different ways. One of the things that struck me the other day is I was thinking about, why are people choosing to have Zoom meetings as opposed to just phone calls, conference calls? And so I don't know what all of you think of that, but one of the things that occurred to me about why many meetings will be Zoom instead of conference calls is because you see the person. It makes you feel better because you're actually staring at someone. And you know they have to be allegedly invested and involved in the discussion or in the meeting because you can see their face and there's proof. And it struck me that I think a lot of the times when people do Zoom meetings, that they're doing it because it makes them feel better that they can actually see the person and know they're working. Now, what I want you to think about a little bit is when you are doing something at a screen like you are now, you know, you're staring at a screen and you're hoping the instructor is engaging and offering you valuable techniques and tips. But if you're in a meeting or you're interacting with other people, it's not necessarily stimulating to sit down and stare at a screen. As a matter of fact, it really lowers your energy level. Often when I do webinars and training, I'm standing up. I'm not standing up right now, but I do often stand up. And so why I bring that up is, let's say you were having a meeting with people on your team and you couldn't see their face. It was a phone call and they were out walking. You know, they're out walking down the street, just going out for a walk. What do you think is more likely to get them engaged in and exercise thought, whether they're out for a walk or whether they're staring at a screen so you can have proof that you can see them? So one of the first elements I want to throw out to you as listeners today is, if you're doing a virtual meeting and you're engaging people through Zoom, what's the motivation for it? And I'm not condemning it. There's a lot of value. I mean, what did I say in the beginning of this webinar today? I'm a huge fan of face-to-face communication. So this is the next best thing, right? But I think we have to balance and really understand how people learn effectively, how people are engaged, and what motivates people to participate. And so I think this is a big element that Zoom, if we're going a 180 and overcompensating with the lack of physical distancing, then I don't know that we go do the opposite and go to all Zoom meetings. I think we need to balance the best way to engage people, the best way to stimulate thought. Now, when I think of trust, there's a lot of factors that go into trust. And I'm just going to talk about at a very high level the three main factors that go into trust. One is beliefs and values. And what I mean specifically by beliefs and values are, what are the experiences, the values, and the belief systems you've been raised around in the past? And I'll give you a perfect example. If you're the kind of person that either says out loud or says to yourself, this person needs to earn trust, earn my trust. I need to believe that they are trustworthy. That's a value system that you developed. Either that was something your parents impressed upon you, you had previous bosses that you were in a culture that really believed in that. But that's what I mean by beliefs and value systems. So if you're the kind of person that really puts up a barrier and someone has to really earn your trust, here's the problem and here's the challenge with that. The person doesn't know that, number one, in most cases. And number two, even if they did know that, they don't know what they need to do to earn your trust unless you're actually articulating, okay, here are the things that I would like to see happen. And nobody does that. I get that. But the point is that if you have beliefs and value systems about how you trust people, either in personal or professional relationships, if they don't know what those beliefs and value systems are, they're going to have a really difficult time earning your trust because they're not going to know what they need to do because they have to follow your set of rules. Now, that builds on the second thing, which are unrealistic or unspoken expectations. Now, this is a pet peeve of mine because I think many leaders in the workplace right now do a really poor job of articulating what their expectations are of the people that work for them. And let's be honest, how do we measure people, right? You take a job, you've read the job description, and your job description is your alleged expectations. But we know that's not true. You have a job description, and then you have many companies use KPIs, key performance indicators. You have goals. Many companies insist on having you reach specific goals, right? So your expectations are, here's how you're going to be measured. Here's what your job description says you're going to do, period, end of discussion. But it's simply not true. You know, if you're a leader and you're on this call, you know there's so many things you expect of your employees that are your team that have nothing to do with a job description or KPIs. And so if people don't know what your expectations are of them, they can't meet them. The simple rule of expectations, I often, when I do in-person training, I joke around with people and I ask people to raise their hand and say, hey, how many people like when others have expectations of you? By the way, talk about a dirty word. Expectations might need to be added to that list. And most people say, yeah, I don't really love when people have expectations. Some people say they don't mind, but many say they don't like it. And my rule of thumb is there's nothing wrong with someone having an expectation of you as long as it's articulated and agreed on. As long as you know what that expectation is and you've agreed on it. Sometimes I think in the workplace, we get very, very short-sighted because when we try to motivate and incentivize people, we do it the same way with everybody. We come up with these systems or processes, whether it's money, whether it's time off, whether it's vacation time, whatever. We just say, listen, this is what people want and need in a general way, and that's how we're going to motivate and reward them. But it doesn't work like that. You can't motivate and incentivize everybody the same way. So the unrealistic and unspoken expectations goes both ways. When you're creating virtual relationships, right, they need to know what your expectations are and you need to know what theirs are, right? Because they have expectations of you. And all this COVID-19 has done in creating this remote environment is it's brought this concept to the forefront. Because again, I don't think we do a good job as leaders explaining and articulating what our expectations are well before COVID. Now, more than ever, when you can't see people and you don't know what they're doing all the time and you're questioning their productivity and their value and their engagement level, you better make sure you have very defined and clear expectations. Now, the third thing is baggage and past experiences. And this is what I mean when I talk about emotional intelligence. And I'll give you a prime example of this, and that's delegation. So I'm sure a lot of you have been in positions where you've had to delegate tasks and responsibilities in the past. And when you delegate those things, invariably, you will be let down sometimes. And when you get let down, when you delegate, what you typically do is you say, you know what, I'll just do it myself. You know, by the time I teach them how to do it, I could just figure it out and do it myself. And that's a big factor in trust, because if you are acting that way, what you don't realize and what you may not realize is that the reason why that experience happened so poorly is because maybe you didn't do a good job articulating your expectations. And maybe they were set up to fail. Now, maybe they're just not equipped for you to delegate to them. It, of course, could be that as well. But you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be able to discern between when you're trying to trust people, if you're going to trust someone, is it because they have personally failed you in the past? Or is it because someone has personally failed you in the past? And that's a big difference. And so step one is, which is it? Step two is, did the failure occur because you didn't do your part and they didn't do theirs? Well, we know it takes two to tango. So most likely when you tried to delegate in the past, it failed because both people dropped the ball in some way, shape, or form. So I really want you guys, as you're listening to this, to really understand these are the three factors you need to be self-aware of when you're building any relationships, and certainly remote ones, because all three of these can interfere with effective communication and effective leadership. Now, I would love it. I have to tell you, I would be ecstatic if I could invent a pill that you could give to someone where once they took it, they would automatically trust you. Can you imagine how amazing that would be? And one of the things when I work with sales teams, I often talk about with trust is the second you walk in a room or the second you begin an interaction with a prospect, you've got to figure out a way to prove trust, because the prospect doesn't know you from a hole in the wall. And frankly, how do you prove trust? What are the assumptions you personally have? Think about this for a minute. How does someone prove trust to you? What would be the recipe for someone to earn your trust? Now, one of the points I make is in the realm of sales, I'll just touch upon this briefly. One of the points I make is the way I understand how a prospect needs me to prove trust is I ask them about past experiences. So if I feel like I'm interacting with a prospect and they're kind of doubting the solution or doubting my credibility or doubting the decision, if I sense that, I'll say to them, well, like, what has made you confident when you've made decisions like this in the past? Because by getting them to share their process and their steps to proving trust, now I can know how to prove trust. So in sales, that can be a very effective technique. But look, it comes down to three things, folks. It comes down to, this is in a very generic way, this is what people are looking for to know they can trust you. They want to know that if they need help, they can turn to you. Now, before I even read the other two, think about that. If they need help, they can turn to you. Do you have anybody in your life that would unequivocally say they could turn to you for every possible situation they need help with? No, there's no way. We all have different people in our lives that provide support and help and guidance in certain areas. You know, I read an interesting article the other day about the difference between a coach, a mentor, and a counselor. And they're very different roles. There is crossover, but there's very different roles. So if my expectation of you as my leader is that I can turn to you when I need help, that's a pretty big request. And if I'm that leader, I want to know, what can you count on me for? What do you want to count on me for? Those are very important questions to know in knowing your team. The second thing is your availability. If I need your help, I can count on you to be there. The old sitcom Friends, I'll be there for you. Another big ask. You're always going to be available for me. How can you always be available for me? And especially with COVID, a lot of us are gun shy to make certain requests because we don't want to stress people out. We don't want to overburden people. A lot of schools, when they're teaching kids, are being very light in workloads because, oh my God, if we give homework or if we give an assignment, kids are going to crumble. They're going to fall apart. And you can sense my sarcasm because I don't like making decisions based on the lowest common denominator. I like coaching up and letting people adapt and learn how to cope. So the point is, I'll be there for you. Will you be there for this person? And if you're not, is that an indication that you don't care or you're not invested in them? And the last one is that whatever you do to help them and be available, they will automatically feel supported by your gestures. Now look, that's at a very high level. And I am spending a lot of time on this webinar on trust because it is so critical. Every single thing in an effective relationship stems from trust. So you have to understand what people want from you, how they're going to earn your trust, how you're going to earn their trust. What are the expectations? What are the barriers? Now, here's what is really getting in the way, aside from the obvious trust. Here's what things stem from a lack of trust in remote relationships. Okay? It starts out with, there is this absolutely ludicrous mindset that we have in the workplace. It is so outdated and irrational that the people that work the hardest are the people that are there the hardest, or that are there the longest. How many times have you heard a leader acknowledge someone Oh, they're the first person in and the last one to leave. Oh, God. So they must be the best worker you have. They must work because it's obviously about quantity and not quality. And I remember my first company, Mark Altman Associates. I'll never forget this. I had a girl that I hired. She was in her early to mid 20s. And I remember the first day on the job, she was supposed to work until 5 o'clock. She walked up to me at 4 o'clock and said, quote unquote, "Can I go home now?" And I said, "Well, no, you work till 5. And she said, "Yeah, but I've been more efficient than the rest of your employees. I mean, I've been looking around and watching everybody, and I know I got more work done so far today than they will even by 5 o'clock." And I was so taken aback by her brazen comment, but where that wasn't maybe an appropriate comment for someone on their first day, the bigger message there is it's about quality and not quantity. How do you measure, right? How do you measure someone's productivity? And please don't put in my face KPIs, because KPIs really pigeonhole people. And you know what? I'll tell you what KPIs do. And by the way, I use KPIs. There's a value for them, so I'm not dismissing them. But KPIs destroy critical thinking. KPIs destroy personal aspirations of goals and development. And so the point I'm making is, again, before COVID-19 hit, if I asked you, how are you evaluating your employees? You probably would have said KPIs or goals that you've developed for them, or whether they turn in their projects on time, or whether their projects are done really well and at a high quality level and things like that, which are great. But we really don't have accurate ways to measure someone's productivity in the real sense of the word, unless you're tracking it, which of course, God forbid we do that, that would be micromanagement. So what's interesting is now people are at home. We can't see them. We feel a lack of control because we don't really know what they're doing. And what's even worse is if we don't get a hold of them during regular office hours, if someone's not working 2 to 4 because they're out spending time with their kids or their significant other or whoever, then, oh my God, why can't I reach that person? They're not available. Whether they're for that work, they're at work, you know where they are and you know they're working. So immediately those fears come into play. Are they really working? Are they working enough? And one of the things I thought would be an interesting experiment is for the flexibility of working at home. There's an assumed workload everybody has. And I use the term assumed lightly because let's face it, that workload can fluctuate larger or smaller than the norm, but there's an assumed workload. So here's my point. If you had someone working from home and you gave them 50 to 60 hours a week at work, and then they came back to you and said, geez, the workload's kind of heavy, my thought process would be, well, yeah, right, but that's the balance of working from home. So the point I'm trying to make is, what is the expectation of workload and what is the expectation of productivity? Every time you tell yourself, I don't think this person's doing what they're supposed to do, I don't think this person's going to finish the project on time, they're not working when they're supposed to be working, and all the time you lay out these fears to yourself or to the person, why? Why even do it? If your expectations were clear about what they're supposed to get done, when they're supposed to get it done, how much of a workload you expect from them, it doesn't matter. So I really think so many of our fears around lack of control are really irrational and unfounded, and they really stem from a lack of good communication about expectations. Now, look, one of the big things that I see being a problem is the lack of collaboration, lack of proper training and resources, and how this will affect team building and culture, right? And so we're talking about earning trust. How do you earn trust virtually? How do you know if they're engaged? And the first real step in here when we talk about employee engagement is, how do you know if someone is engaged in what you're doing and what they're doing? And I hear a lot leaders and executives talk about they wish their teams would take more initiative And how come they're not in a rush to get things done and be challenged and so on and so forth? Well, I think a lot of that has to do that people aren't really engaged, and people do their job in a way just to get through the day. And we're going to see that we've already seen it, and we're going to continue to see it in the coming months because there are bigger issues going on. So people's coping skills is just to get through the day and do their job. And there's a difference in doing your job and in liking and being passionate about your job. So here's what I want you to think about when it comes to employee engagement. Prepared a slide for you. And I don't know how often you do coaching with your leadership teams. And if you're not a leader on this call, I don't know how often your leaders coach with you. But as a leader, these are the questions I'm asking my team members, right? And I'm having these kinds of discussions no more than once a month. And they're all very open-ended. Are you happy? Now, what's very important in this conversation technique, and this is an example of conversation intelligence. What's very important in this technique is if you say to someone, are you happy? Do you like what you're doing? And they say, yeah, it's pretty good. Well, that doesn't tell you anything, right? So it's not ask these questions as a script. It's ask these questions with a curious mindset, follow-up questions to be open-ended to really understand what they're thinking. Are you happy? Are you challenged? Are you struggling in any areas? Are you engaged? Do you feel you have everything you need to be successful? And do you feel supported? And you'll notice what I have at the top where I say, are they self-aware and are you? And as far as are they self-aware, here's where I'm going. My point is, if the people that are working for you are struggling to answer these questions, that's not good. You want them to be able to answer these questions, because if they are self-aware and they are in touch with their feelings and emotions and passions and goals and aspirations, then they're engaged. If they really are struggling to answer any of these questions, they're not engaged. I mean, they can tell you they're engaged, but if they're struggling to answer one or two is okay, but struggling to answer the majority or half, that's a problem. And what I say is, are you self-aware? Are you truly aware of how committed people are to your organization? How many times have you had someone quit where you didn't see it coming? How many times have you seen someone's productivity dip and you didn't see it coming? And you're sitting there, geez, I wonder what's going on. In remote relationships, your coaching skills are more important than ever. And staying connected and finding ways to individualize these relationships are a requirement. So these are the questions. If you're trying to engage people and strengthen those remote relationships, these are the questions you should be asking. Now, one of the things that's starting to come out is this syndrome called Zoom exhaustion. Okay. And you might chuckle and say, what the heck is Zoom exhaustion? But I think this picture really tells it all. And I wonder, when people are on virtual meetings, are they really paying attention? Are you paying attention right now, or are you doing something else while I'm talking? And so the thing with Zoom exhaustion is virtual meetings really require intense concentration, staring at a screen, and they really have abrupt starts and ends, which doesn't feel natural in flow of meetings and communications. And here's one that occurred to me, is there's no change of scenery. It's staring at the same thing all the time. And if you think about different things you did in your life, when you get sick of things that you do repeatedly all the time, it does affect your motivation and engagement and willingness level to do something. So Zoom exhaustion, as I said before, when it comes to engaging people, and I'm specifically talking about meeting engagement right now, okay? So look, I don't really know right now if you're all listening. I really don't. I can't see you. I'm choosing not to have all your faces up on the screen because there's too many people. And I think it's really a struggle to understand if people are engaged. And one of the techniques I want you to take away today is this conversation technique I teach called communication confirmation. And very often when we're providing people new information, giving them directions or instructions on how to do something, very often at the end of it, we'll ask someone, Does that make sense? Do you understand? Any questions? And it's very important that you understand that when you ask that question, the likelihood that someone is going to tell you the truth, that they don't understand something, is very, very slim. And they're saying it because they don't want to feel judged. They don't want to look stupid. I mean, if you ask a question right now during this webinar and you go in the chat room, it's going to say your name in your question. And you don't know what other people will think about your question. They might think that's a dumb question. So how do you get communication confirmation? How do you create an environment remotely where people will tell you the truth? Because when I hear leaders complain to me that they're having multiple conversations about their teams about the same thing, I always say that one of the factors in that is because you're not getting communication confirmation. You're not getting the honest truth about people, what they're comfortable with and what they understand. The way to get communication confirmation, the way I get it, is when I'm teaching someone something, I'll do any of the following things. When I ask that question, does this make sense to you understand? If they say yes, I'll laugh and I'll say jokingly, would you tell me if you didn't? And then usually the other person kind of smiles and laughs. And then I'll look at them and I'll say, seriously, please don't feel bad. If you have any questions, I know what it's like to learn something new. It's a terrible feeling to not understand something and feel blind when you're taking on a task or a project. So please feel comfortable. I want everybody in the room to feel comfortable to speak out if there's something you don't understand and don't make sense. And a lot of times when I go into schools and work with high school and college kids, one of the points I make is there's no judgment. We're in a no judgment zone. So you as a leader have to create the culture. You have to define the rules for the culture that are going to make people comfortable sharing and participating. Because it's a two-part. I'm focusing on things they might not understand or feel comfortable sharing, but it's also participating in the meetings, right? So in my meetings, when I do meetings with people, when I teach meeting management, right? And I'm going to send you guys a handout after this about some good rules for virtual meeting engagement, but I'm just going to cover a few of them, okay, right now. And understand before I cover these rules, one of the things I really want you to think about is what you can control in a meeting. You can control your voice tone and energy level. I'm very hyper. You guys can tell I'm very passionate. You know, I don't drink coffee. People always tease me all the time. How you don't drink coffee yet you're still this hyper. So the thing I want you to think about is this. If you're not interesting in the way you convey information as a presenter, as a meeting facilitator, you're already losing in a big way. I'm a big sports fan. Can you imagine if when a guy hit a home run, the announcer was like, and David Ortiz hits a home run? You'd be like, huh? How come you're not excited about that? You've got to be responsible when you're presenting. I don't care whether you're a leader, you're a salesperson, what role you have in your life where you're presenting information. If you can't deliver effective voice tone and energy, if you can't make learning applicable, and listen, don't tell me people have to go to these meetings because it's part of their job. Yeah, they do, but that doesn't mean they're going to care or be invested or engaged. Your job is to make this meeting applicable, is to explain to them the why and explain the value they can offer and the value they're going to receive from this meeting. So when I do meetings for remote relationships, here's what my requirements are. Pre-meeting requirements. Everybody comes to the meeting with ideas and solutions, which means an agenda needs to be provided beforehand and expectations of what you are coming to the meeting with needs to be provided beforehand. And you saw before this webinar started today, I put in the chat box, I said, what's your goal? What do you want out of this? Ask everybody in your meetings, what is your goal for this meeting today? Get them to articulate it and verbalize it. And I'm going to tell you all that the biggest kryptonite to effective and confident communication and emotional intelligence is time. Because to coach people and to ask these questions about what your goals for the meeting are, you have to take more time. Time that we allegedly don't have. Bullshit. We have the time. We make choices every day how we're spending our time. If you're too busy to make your meetings engaging and effective, if you're too busy to individualize communication with people so you can connect with them on a personal level, If you're too busy to do monthly one-on-one coaching sessions, you're in the wrong business. Sorry, you're in the wrong business. Now, a couple other quick points on meeting engagement I want to cover, and then we're going to wrap up because I know we only have about 5 or 10 minutes left here. So number one, before you move on in a meeting topic, actually take the time to say, has everyone voiced any concerns or questions that they have? Leave room, ask that question, because a lot of people might feel uncomfortable asking because they might feel they don't want to take the time, they're running out of time, they don't want to interrupt your flow. Ask, has everybody had a chance to contribute or ask the questions? Validation's critical. Validation's such a critical, fundamental part of communication. If someone has an idea or a thought and a question that you think is the stupidest question in the history of the earth, validate it. Validate does not mean agree. For those of you who've been part of my trainings, you know I say that. If you validate, you're just acknowledging someone's idea and thought. You're not agreeing with it. Lastly, share wins. Share compliments and thank yous. A big part of my meetings, and I do what I call collaboration postmortems. A big part of my meetings is I ask people what went well, what didn't go well, what would you change and do differently for our next meeting? I'm not proposing you ask that every meeting, but depending on how frequent your meetings are and how long your meetings are, that would be great, like post-meeting, and everybody stays on the phone for 15 minutes and talks about why was the meeting effective, why wasn't it, how could it be different? That's a very effective communication strategy. Now I'm going to finish with what I would argue is the most important thing of all regarding trust. And I've talked about it throughout the presentation today, and that's setting ground rules and expectations. And I'm giving you the recipe here. Okay, I'm telling you that to build trust and to set expectations and to remove fears that you have about a loss of control because people are out of sight, out of mind, here is the template for the things you should be discussing with your team to set expectations and remove fears and issues of trust. So I'm going to run through them really quickly. Reporting. How often do you want people to report to you? I'm not being funny. You know, if you don't see them for a long time, you may want to know how they're progressing on projects. You know, you could set a boundary or set a guideline and say, listen, I'm going to assume if this project is due Friday, if I don't hear from you, I'm expecting it'll be turned in on Friday. But if you're having any issues and you anticipate problems, I don't want to hear from you the day it's due. I want to hear from you 2 days earlier at minimum. So when people are reporting on updates on their productivity, their tasks, their projects, let them know what you want. And I just want to caution people. For those of you who are sitting there thinking, oh, you know what, I agree with him, but I don't want to come across as a micromanager. You know what? Micromanager is another one of the dirty words I'm going to add, because I have to tell you, micromanage means different things to different people. And what you may perceive is micromanaging, that person may not perceive as micromanaging. Setting expectations and having clear guidelines is not micromanaging. It's removing ambiguity and it's removing problems down the road. Frequency. How often do you want to hear from people? And how do you want to hear from them? Can they send you an email? Do you want them to call you on the phone? Do you want to set up a weekly Zoom meeting? What's the frequency that you want to talk to people, and how do you want to do it? If you want status updates, be specific. What do you want to be included in the status updates? Give them a template email and say, this is how I would like the status update to look, and this is what I want you to cover. Collaboration protocol. How often do you want them to be interacting with the fellow team members? And if they say, you know, I don't have a reason to interact, well, that's the danger of the remote workplace, right? Because when you're not out of sight, out of mind, and someone's right next door, you're inclined to go interact and brainstorm with them. When you're not, you're inclined not to. Don't take that lightly. You want to set up collaboration protocol and make sure people are socially interacting and brainstorming and problem solving. Meeting expectations I just covered. Hours of availability, I mentioned that earlier in the call. I talked about how if you don't mind, if you just want them to work a certain amount of hours every day and you don't mind if it's 7 to 11 at night as opposed to 1 and 5 in the afternoon, tell them that. If there's conditions around that, communicate that. But before I cover the last one, I want to reinforce to everybody, you've got to get out of your own head, because if by setting expectations, that means micromanaging to you, it's not. It's very different. It's as different as being assertive and aggressive. Now, the last thing is the types of work at home and types of work in an office. Now, for right now, most of us aren't coming into the office, but in the long term, think about works. I think we can all agree, sometimes when we're isolated and we're by ourselves, we're more productive and effective. But it is important to discern between which kinds of work would be better suited for home and which kinds of work are better suited for an office. So when people are actually at the office, you can maximize the time and value and set guidelines for that. Look, everybody, productivity and engagement and effective leadership is got to be measured by quality and not quantity. If you start adding up hours, if you start saying first person in, last person to leave, you're blind. You're not seeing the truth. And it tells me you don't really have effective ways to measure productivity. And I got to tell you, if I worked for you and I knew that that's what was getting recognized and articulated, then it would kind of be a downer for me, because I would think the other things that I'm doing that may be more important than that aren't getting recognized. So, lastly, coaching for development through emotional intelligence, okay? And I will send you some of these slides today, so if you're panicking that you don't have all this written down, but I do want to end with this in habit change. And if any of you have to go, here's the scoop. I am going to stay after to answer questions. If anybody has to answer questions, I'll go for another 5 minutes, and then I'll answer questions and we'll wrap up. I will send you everybody a recording of the webinar. I will send you a resource handout about effective meeting management. I will send you the slides that you would care about from this presentation. And I'll also send you important ways you can continue to follow our schedule of trainings and leadership tips and sales tips, etc. So final two concepts today. Being an effective coach as a leader. Here's what matters. Make time to lead. Have the self-awareness. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. Be aware. Are you not making the time? And if you're too busy, what are your standards and goals for leadership? Because if developing people and inspiring people and engaging people aren't your goals for leadership, you're in the wrong business. You have to make time. And if you're struggling to make time, be self-aware of what's getting in the way. And is that really more important? Familiarity. Get to know your team. Check in. Do the engagement check-ins. Set the expectations. Individualized communication. Communication itself. This is the hardest of all, right? Because communication, well, what the heck does that mean? Right? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means how, when, how often. It means balancing constructive and positive feedback. It means learning how to express your frustrations by responding and not reacting. There's a lot of things that go into communication. Leading by example. I have a radio show every Thursday. For those of you who aren't familiar, you can listen to it on tunein.com from 1 to 2 on Thursdays, or download it on Apple and Spotify. Point is, I'm doing the show on Thursday on leading by example. What a joke. Leading by example is such a throwaway phrase. And I'll tell you the problem with leading by example. I don't think you want your team to follow your example with everything. And we usually mean by work ethic, but again, it's lazy. So I'm going to talk on Thursday about what leading by example really should mean. Recognition. How are you recognizing people? More than ever, people need that recognition. Compliments aren't falling on trees. Part of your job as a leader is to recognize people, make them feel good in an authentic manner. Growth mindset. What are your standards for success for yourself? If people struggle and they fail at something, or they don't meet your expectations, what's the message you give them? Is it to learn from their mistakes and understand what they learned from those mistakes? Or is it to be disappointed and tell them they didn't meet your standards? Big difference in how information is received, and big information on how people develop and get their confidence. Delegation, I talked about earlier. Be truthful. Why are you delegating or not delegating? And decisiveness. It's scary. It's scary to make decisions right now because we can't forecast the future. And so many companies make decisions based on financial forecasts. Well, guess what? We don't know. you're going to have to make decisions, and you're going to have to group those decisions in decisions you would make regardless, in decisions that are based on how things evolve from the COVID virus. But either way, you need to move forward and you need to make decisions, and you can't live in fear, because if your team picks up that you're indecisive, they will be indecisive. It's about modeling behavior. Look, when it comes to habit change, what it really comes down to is mindfulness. And I always end the webinar with this, because if you're going to change habits, you have to be mindful. You have to be self-aware of what you're doing and not doing. When I talked about being busy, if you're being mindful, you catch yourself not being in charge of your time. You catch yourself realizing you're letting priorities slip by the wayside. That's mindfulness. Mindfulness is not necessarily execution. Mindfulness is self-awareness and recognition. You can't fix a habit, you can't change a behavior until you catch yourself doing it. So one of your goals from the webinar today should be to identify 2 or 3 behaviors as a professional, as a leader, as a salesperson, as a communicator, that you want to be mindful of moving forward, because you know you need to fix them, you know you need to be better, but you have to be honest with yourself and be mindful when they happen. So that's mindfulness. All right, lastly, really appreciate the time. I continue to try to do these free webinars to add value to people's lives, professional, business, organizations. I will post a thank you on LinkedIn. It would mean a lot to me if you really enjoyed this webinar today. If you got some things out of it, do me a favor. Could you share the post on your network so your followers can see why you liked it and I can get some exposure? If you want to add a comment, great. That'd be wonderful. But I'm advocating for myself and would love that if you were willing. Look, I know it's hard to do training right now, and I know for a lot of companies, training is not the biggest priority, but I do a lot of coaching. I've been getting a lot of inquiries for coaching over the last month. So look, if your company could benefit from virtual training, if you could benefit, or you know someone at your company that could benefit from executive or emotional intelligence leadership coaching, let me know. Happy to help. Never hurts to talk. These are the ways you can reach me. And, you know, I feel like there's so many things that go into leadership and being an effective coach as a leader. And that's where I think so many have never been trained and can really develop and benefit from coaching. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to answer any questions people have, and I'll give it a couple of minutes, but otherwise really appreciate your time. Look forward to hearing what you got out of the webinar. And if you can go to our website, we have 4 more webinars scheduled for May if you'd like to sign up. So, questions. What can I answer for everybody? Or feedback, if you want to give feedback in the chat room too. All right. Ted, thank you. Ted, thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate that. It means a lot. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I will, I'm going to put my personal, oops. I'm going to put my personal email in the chat box if you want to email me privately. Otherwise, okay. Thank you for Donna, Sheila. Thank you so much for your comments as well. It really does mean a lot, everybody. I put a lot of time and effort into making these valuable. So, and constructive feedback, I'm very open to too. I always want to improve. It's one of my core values. So, so anyway, okay. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure. Can't wait to talk with you all again. And please stay happy, safe, healthy with you, your families, your company, and your colleagues. Have a wonderful day.